Hi. Hi, Davis. Hi, Jared. Hey, everybody. I'm Veronica. I'm waiting for my guests to join me. So come on in, get comfy. Oh, look, they're here. Hey, Meg. Hey. Oh, Jared's saying hello. I wish I knew who you were. We probably know each other. There's Abby. What's up, Abby? Hey, Fox.
Hi.
Jay.
Hi.
We're just welcoming people in. You guys comfy?
Super comfy.
We're squeezing in on like a vertical phone right now.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky.
Yeah, we're trying to make the best of the space. So
You look good though. You look good. I
okay.
have good views of both of you.
Perfect.
You look good too.
Oh, thanks.
We're
You
all
like my
beautiful.
glasses?
Interview ready?
Interview ready. Interviewer ready. For everybody joining us, my name is Veronica. This is
Fox.
And I'm Adriana, Adri for short.
Thank you for tuning in with us. We are exploring some conversations around LGBTQ, and I'll kind of give you some background information. If you're viewing now or later, then you're probably connected to the Breathe Instagram. Welcome to the Breathe Instagram. Breathe is a community of people that do gather once a year annually in July, and we have a big, amazing festival in Indiana. That's not everything that we are. We live throughout the year. We like to say that we're a breathe being. We are constantly working on projects and doing things together and yeah, just celebrating life. And one of the things we like to do are breathe pulses, which is kind of like the heartbeat of the breathe community throughout the year. And so that could be anything like these kinds of conversations, or it could be performances, whatever our breathers, which means you're a breather, even if you've never been to breathe. It's what they're doing throughout the year. So this is a Breathe Pulse hosted by our committee called the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And there are several committees involved with the setup of Breathe. And diversity and inclusion focuses on promoting diversity within the community and making sure that everybody feels included and that we're doing our work to learn the ways to include people, because everyone is so different and our community is so diverse and beautiful. And so everyone kind of deserves that unique recognition of the things that make them feel safe and included. So tonight we're kicking off the first of a series of Pulse conversations that center around the LGBTQ experience. And I'm very honored to be joined by two friends that I love very much, who are also breathers, who I will now let them introduce themselves.
Do you want to
You
go first?
first.
I'll go first. I'm Fox, or Barnaby is my legal name, but I am known in the Breathe world as Fox. I'm 29 now, and so I've been transitioning for about 5 years. I live in Arizona, but I'm here in Wisconsin with Adri now. Um, I'm a trans masculine male, and by trans masculine is that I present masculine physical features. And then the only surgery that I've had so far that I've been able to afford on my own is top surgery, which is a double mastectomy. The next on my list is a hysterectomy, but other than that, my hormone treatments are a intramuscular shot every week on Tuesdays.
Fox, I love that you're right into it. Adri, I want to hear from you too, but Fox, I just want to validate that you're so willing to share this information, and it's really cool because then we get to have an inside perspective of your life and what that means to you. So thank you for being so vulnerable right off the bat. You're awesome.
Yeah, he's definitely an open book. What's up, everyone? My name is Adriana. I have been transitioning for 4 years now. I do identify as a transgender woman. Yeah, I'm in Wisconsin, as he mentioned also. We are I'm going to be moving to Arizona where he's living now. But for the quarantine time, we're just spending it here in Wisconsin. I'm 27 years old. I started my hormone transition like a year and a half ago, a year and 6 months now. So still kind of fairly new to everything that's kind of been like changing and stuff. So yeah, we're happy to share some of our experiences as transgender individuals. So
Thank you both so much for being here. And thank you for joining us now and later. If you're watching with us, we're really happy to have you here. And if you are watching at a later date, again, you're still part of this community, and we're really glad that whoever is a part of it is here to share that space and learn about each other and play in the pond. We have a pond at Breathe that we always talk about. We like to play in the pond. So yeah, to kind of kick it off, I want to do a little bit of like vocabulary just so that everyone feels welcome. There's a lot of, when you start to learn about diversity and inclusion, there can be a lot of new words that are challenging and make it, you know, a little bit intimidating to start, but finding vocabulary that everybody is comfortable with is a really good way to make sure that people feel heard and seen. So yeah, using good vocabulary is important. And if you're watching, feel free throughout this conversation, if there's something that you don't understand or something that you've never heard before, feel free. We'll keep an eye on the comments and let us know that you want a little bit more information about that, or that you want to have a word defined. That's what this is about. So feel free to be involved. So if you two want to start and just like rattle off some words that you commonly, that are new, and that when you're getting into learning about the LGBTQ community, words that you might hear that, you know, maybe have differing definitions. What are some things that come to mind?
So new, and what we get questions for the most, one is gender dysphoria. A lot of people don't know what that means. And it means to have, for gender dysphoria specifically, is to not feel aligned in, emotionally and psychologically with the birth gender you are assigned. So that's meaning like, just recently I let Adri shave all of my beard off, and that's one of my like yeah, it's like what I hold on the most for my like dysphoria. So it was a very dysphoric feeling having a bare face again. It was very familiar from pre-transition time. So that's like one example. Another,
I think right off the bat we should discuss what being transgender is to start off, right? Like
yeah.
I don't really know like the proper like definite definition of what transgender is, but from what I explain to people is pretty much when you're born, you're assigned sex at birth or gender, and then you decide to transition because you don't feel like you're that gender, like that your body portrays. You don't feel that inside, so then you decide to transition, and that's what you consider transgender.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. So then just to bring those two together, identity and expression, those are some other words that people use, like your biological gender, something that you're born with, but then your gender identity is something that you are, something that you feel, and that's kind of on a different level. And so those things can be separate, and they can be the same too, like if you're born a biological woman and you identify as a woman, that can match, but it can be every other way as well. Identity and expression don't necessarily they don't really have anything to do with each other.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Can you talk about maybe some of the common things that happen when somebody is transitioning? So like some of the really common medical procedures or things that happen when somebody transitions, or somebody who doesn't use medical transitioning. What are other ways that people can transition?
So I think, I mean, it's definitely different with transgender women and transgender men because different things happen because it's not the same thing. So transgender women, and first of all, you also don't need to take any.
Hi, Dakota.
You don't necessarily need to have any surgeries or get on any hormone treatments or anything like that in order to identify as a transgender individual. Like you could just simply feel that way and not decide that you want to go the hormone route or want to get a surgery and completely avoid that, and you're still very much validated as a transgender individual. With that also being said, transgender women typically, some of the things right away that you may do when you decide to transition is get on a hormone treatment. I mean, that's like similar with trans men and trans women, just the difference is what you're taking. So for instance, I have to take 2 medications for my hormone transition. I am like on a testosterone blocker, and then I do inject estrogen to replace that. Whereas he just has to inject testosterone once a week. So there's like two differences with transgender people. And then after that, it really just depends on the individual, what they decide they want to do in order to kind of get rid of their dysphoria as much as they can. So like surgeries, like top surgery or like breast augmentation, or just like a couple examples of what you can get when you decide to transition.
And this is the perfect opportunity for us to say how everyone's experience is different. Mm-hmm. Our experience as trans individuals are not going to be the representation for everyone on the spectrum.
Right.
And so what we're explaining and all the questions that we're answering, we've already given consent to. So it's okay asking these questions to us now, but these are not typically questions that you would right off the bat ask someone after meeting them. We are both pretty comfortable, so yeah, and we're very open about our transition. So yeah, we just our experiences alone.
Me and him have definitely been very open on social media. Like if you follow our Instagram pages, we have like lots of posts kind of showing milestones in our transition. So we're not every trans person is like that. Some people are a lot more closeted about that and would rather just keep that to themselves. So yeah, that's why we wanted to do this call, to kind of just educate people on what is this life that we live. So
yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because it's important that, you know, this all comes down to that same idea of making people feel seen exactly as they are and accepted as exactly as they are. And so that experience is going to look really different from person to person, and vulnerability level, comfort level is going to look different from person to person. We don't just go around walking around asking people about their sexuality or who they're attracted to or what genitals they have. We don't ask those questions. So it doesn't make sense to ask them unless we have rapport and consent with someone.
Right.
So yeah, thank you for clarifying that. This is a really good transition into just kind of the general background of inclusion. So if you're just joining us, thank you for being here.
Hi, Brad.
Hey, Brad. We're coming to you from Breathe, hosted by the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and we're starting a series of conversations that focuses on the LGBTQ experience. So we just kind of have been talking a little bit about like the common, just like the idea of what it means to be trans and some of those, you know, basic words that you run into when you start learning about the trans experience. And then also we're just kind of coming into this idea of, so Fox brought up that even though it is wonderful that they're feeling comfortable to share this information, it deserves some consideration whenever you approach someone to talk about something as vulnerable as their sexual identity or expression, that we do that with like consideration of that individual's unique desire and comfort level. And so, and that mission to do that, to recognize the individual and to honor their unique comfort levels, is part of the greater scheme of inclusion. And so this conversation is focusing around the experiences of our LGBTQ community, because they're often excluded from the considerations of like decision making, or like if you're in a group, or like socially, just our culture doesn't have strong built-in considerations for the experiences of everyone. And some people that are often left out of those conversations are communities of the members of the LGBTQ community. So just to kind of give some background of where we're coming from and the purpose of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and outside of Breathe as a whole, taking it into the world, is really tacking into this this history of how we have made groups based on who we're attracted to and how we express ourselves. And so if you haven't looked into the history of LGBTQ or Pride or the Stonewall riots, I really encourage you to do that. a lot of LGBTQ, what we have today, the freedom and the expression and the beautiful parades comes out of some very brave people who suffered violence and brutality because of normal things about them, because of how they want to express themselves. So this work that we're doing, a local civil rights hero where I live has a quote that I really like to use, that we have to work as hard to include people as history has worked to exclude them. So part of it is just part of the work. It's really hard when we're like, what does it mean to do inclusion work? But it's retroactively looking back at the things that made us, distant from each other, made us feel separate. And then having those hard conversations. Sometimes it looks like calling out a colleague or a family member or a friend. And it's just shifting that narrative that this is not an us and them thing. This is not a this population and that population. This is an us thing. This is a big group of us learning to include all the members of us, all the people in our group. So a tool, that's a really complex thing to get into, but a tool that we like to use in Breathe is I'm listening. I love you. Tell me more. Yeah. And it can be hard in those conversations to know how to approach it. But the main thing here that we're getting at is that people deserve to feel heard and seen. And they deserve to express themselves however they want to and to feel safe doing that. And so our responsibility as community members is just to say, cool, I am here for that. I'm here for that. I'm listening to what you're telling me. I love you. Whatever you're telling me, I love about you. Tell me more about it. So just inviting people to be whatever they are is really kind of the mission behind inclusion in the world and inclusion at Breathe.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you guys want to add anything onto that before we dive into some questions?
I'd like to say that for me personally, I think inclusion is really important because not always can you tell if someone's being excluded. For me, for example, I'm a passing trans male, so a lot of people don't know off the bat that I have a trans experience. So there's many times where I don't go around introducing myself as a trans person in day-to-day life, and there's been a lot of times where people have like inappropriately brought up stories about trans people and in joking environments and did not realize they were offending someone in the room. And you never know who in your fam or in the person you're talking to, maybe they have family that is of that experience. So I think it's important for inclusion to be educational and heard, is because not always do you realize when you're not being inclusive, it's offending not even just the people who are marginalized groups, but people who have family in that group. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I think that's important to point out, because if you aren't affected by it, you don't know. And so you have to listen. We have to, it's like being interested in the struggles of your neighbor. Like if you're not affected by those unique struggles, how do you know how to address them? And part of that is like a self-acceptance, self-love thing, because there's so much, emotionally charged, these conversations are often really, emotionally charged, and just making space for yourself that you're like, I don't experience this, so I don't know. So it's okay for me to ask, and it's okay for me to listen. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
of course.
Cool. So if you're just joining us, welcome. This is the first Breathe Pulse featuring the Diversity and Inclusion Committee focus on the LGBTQ experience. My name is Veronika. I'm here with Fox and Adri.
Hi.
And now let's kind of dive into some questions. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
You ready?
Ready.
You ready? Okay. Tell me about, you have 3 choices. A food you like to make, a favorite card game, or your favorite dad joke. Food, card game, or dad joke.
I'm probably gonna do food. So I love cooking. I I'm Mexican, so I typically love to cook Mexican food just because I don't know, I just love spicy food, so that's usually what I end up cooking. And even everything else, I just try to always add a spicy twist to it. Like, so like if there's like a traditional recipe that wouldn't be like spicy, I try to be like, how can I make it spicy? So I would say that's what I would do, or that's what I do.
This is so good, but how can we make it spicy?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I feel like as I'm getting older, I'm like becoming more and more like my mom, that I need to have something spicy to eat it. I used to be like, Mom, you're so weird. Why do you have like a chili pepper with everything? But now I'm turning into that. So
I love it. I love it.
For the card game, does it just like a regular deck of cards, or like cards and in general?
Oh, in general.
My favorite would be Ultimate Werewolf. It's kind of like the game Mafia, but you play as this village, and one person is dealt a werewolf card, and after everyone does their turns with their eyes closed, you open your eyes, and everyone has to vote and figure out who in the group is a werewolf, but the werewolf has to pretend to be a villager, and it's a lot of fun. It's amazing. Yeah, it's my favorite.
We played Mafia in like a couple like random like kids groups, and I always look back on it and I'm like, that was so fun. Why don't we do that anymore?
I have it.
If you're watching, you should request that Fox host a live virtual game of what's it called?
Ultimate Werewolf.
Ultimate Werewolf.
Yeah.
Ultimate Werewolf.
I'll
If
bring
you're
it
in for the Ultimate Werewolf, let us know because Fox is gonna do it. We need that. It's quarantine time, we need you.
I love it.
I love it. Okay, tell me about an experience that made you feel loved and or supported. Doesn't have to relate to the trans experience at all. Just a time in your life when you felt loved and supported.
Mine was at Breathe. And when did I do that? 2017. I was at that Breathe and was scheduled right after Breathe to have my top surgery done. And when I first started going to Breathe, I was pre-transition. So I transitioned along with Breathe. And it was really cool seeing how everyone interacted with me and included me into this festival, that it was like a new space. And when you're camping, it's a really vulnerable space for you as a trans individual to be, especially with the ponds, and you're swimming in your new body for the first time in front of all of your friends. So it's a very vulnerable experience, but it was kind of cool how everyone at that Breathe was celebrating with me, because we drove from Breathe straight to Florida for my surgery. Yeah, so it was really exciting. And it was like, Breathe is one of the safest communities I've been around, and it was just really cool to have everyone excited for me. So yeah.
I almost teared up a little bit. Like, oh my gosh, getting like the way that you put that, like getting to swim in your new body for the first time.
Yeah. And that year was my first year in a swimming pool with people, like in a swimming pond. But yeah, it was really
and
cool.
that's such like a homegrown like throwback experience, like being in a pond, like a summer lake with your friends, like that's such a childhood, very like nurturing experience. That's so cool. So cool.
Yeah.
Adri.
I think for me, probably would be with one of my current jobs right now, which is a restaurant bar type place. And I do serve tables there and bartend. So when I did decide to transition, it was very scary for me, because not only was I like going through it with like my family and at home and everything, but I also had to do it at work. But thankfully, the place that I am still at everybody was super supportive. When I just started like kind of wearing more like makeup to work and just kind of deciding to go through with it, everybody was so supportive. My managers were super supportive, the owners, like everybody just made me feel so like good about it. Like it was like perfectly fine to be there. And they always like reassured me that if anybody like customer wise gave me any like trouble for anything, that they were there to back me up and all of that. So that was very, very important for me because I was going through like a very difficult time. So yeah, that's the time.
I love that. And the restaurant industry can be so harsh. And so I'm
Yeah.
glad that I'm glad that that was the like one time that you were actually really supported. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I also want to point out on both of your situations, like both of your memories, that a lot of times especially in American culture, which is, you know, the only one I know that well, things that we think about a person that would make their experience hard, that's not the thing that makes it hard. The thing that makes it hard is people around us and their response to this thing about us that we can't control. And I love that both of you, it was such a good example of like, being a trans person is not like, that's just a thing about you, but it's how the community responds that either makes it amazing or horrible. It's like, it's the responsibility of your peers to like hold you in this world, you know?
Yeah, it's those interactions alone can be the make or break of whether you want to leave the house or not that day.
Right.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can leave the house if you want to.
Yeah. Soon we'll be able to.
Cool. Okay. So I want to go into like a little bit more about like your personal experiences with your transition and how you're feeling now about it. But Fox, before we do that, can you just reiterate, or Adri, can both of you just reiterate a little bit what you brought up about like consent and etiquette, and how we're about to talk about some things that are pretty vulnerable, but how that's not necessarily maybe the best way to approach every conversation with a trans person?
Yeah, so it's super important right now, as we're explaining it, is we've already given the consent to the questions we're answering. Adri and I are both pretty open about our transition experiences already. And beforehand, we had already agreed to do this in this safe environment that we're given. And so it's important to know that the questions that we are answering or the information that we're giving right now is not things to typically ask any trans people when you're meeting them. It's not appropriate, and it's a very vulnerable thing to be asking of. It's also not a trans person's job to educate you. And I believe like that's what my visibility is about, is to help educate so there's less questions for those who don't want to. But our experiences that we're sharing right now are our own experiences. So this isn't going to be representing every trans experience or an individual in any sense. This is going to be us and what we are okay with sharing information wise. It's not the same for everyone. So,
or throughout my transition, I've noticed that people are typically, the way they go about asking things is just simply asking like, do you mind if I ask you a question? And then if I felt comfortable, like, which usually I am an open book about everything, so I'm like, sure, like I don't care, I'll tell you everything. But yeah, like there's always that option to be like, oh no, I do mind, like I'd rather not talk about that, and that's simply it, you know?
And if the individual feels comfortable and safe enough with sharing the information, they'll let you know.
Something I appreciated that came up in, we have committee meetings once a week with typically, and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, something that came up in one of our recent conversations was just this idea of letting people lead their own conversation and just being present. And we hear these words tossed around like ally or advocate, and you know, everybody has kind of different perspectives of that, but just witness, just being there for somebody, like that's what you can do. And however much or little they want to talk about their trans experience or whatever is up to them. And loving them means just being with them at whatever place. And sometimes it means like, you know, and like kind of exploring topics to see if there's anything that they want to talk about, because maybe they haven't had a landing space. But it's like this gentle checking in. It's all guided by the person that, you know, it's their time, it's their space, it's their experience. So Oh, you people look really beautiful.
Thank you.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Steven. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is a conversation hosted by the Diversity and Inclusion Committee from Breathe to focus on the LGBTQ experiences of our lovely family. In this conversation, we've covered a little bit of information about like general vocabulary, what it means to be a trans person, what it means to be inclusive. And now we're kind of diving in a little bit more personally to the experiences of my amazing, lovely friends here. And yeah, so let's get into that a little bit. So, and again, reiterating that like thank you for your vulnerability. Honestly, thank you. Like, thank you for being here and showing up to do that work all the time in your life to kind of field these questions so that we can all learn more. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so whoever wants to start, maybe just kind of talk about what your experience has been like so far, like how long you've been transitioning, maybe some of the more medical aspects of your journey.
Sure. So, again, I've been transitioning for 4 years now. So anybody new, I do identify as a transgender woman, and that kind of began early from as little as I can remember. I knew I always felt like I was very gravitated to things that normally girls like when they're super young, and I would watch shows and I would watch movies, and I would always want to be like, I would associate being the girl in the films and stuff like that. And I always wondered, I was like, why do I feel that? Like, why is it that I don't want to be the boy? Or why is it that I don't want to play with my brother? All these, like, he was so into like video games and sports, and I never wanted to do any of that. And I never really understood why. And then I kind of grew up a little bit, and then I started like getting interested in people, like romantically and things like that. And I noticed that it was always towards men. And of course, I was born a boy biologically, and then I just associated the two things. I was like, okay, well, that means I must be gay, you know? So then I went through a phase where I identified as a gay man, and that was pretty much it up until I graduated high school, and I started kind of getting introduced to the transgender community and started seeing that there are more people that felt like me and people that were going through with transitioning. And I just started getting really like informed and all that. I actually went to high school with someone that started their transition right out of high school. And that was one of my very first like close experiences with someone that I actually knew that was gonna do it. And it was pretty crazy for me. I didn't think it was like possible, and if it was just like, oh my god, that's gonna be so expensive. It was something that was way out of my reach that I never thought I could actually do, up until I started like really looking into it, and I just knew how I felt and what I wanted to be. I knew I didn't want to grow up and grow old as a man, and I just didn't feel comfortable with my body. None of that. So I started just taking steps to do it, and that's where I just started coming out slowly to my siblings, to my family, to work, and then it just became very easy to start doing it when you have like support of people that love you and are pushing you and there to help you. So yeah, and then that was about 4.5 years ago when I decided I was going to start transitioning, and I kind of I started, expressing myself as me more. I started wearing like makeup. I started letting my hair grow out. I started wearing more like gender neutral clothing, and it was just like that for a couple years. And then I kind of came to a halt because I didn't know how to go about getting on hormones. I knew that's what my next step was and what I wanted. And I was just like looking up like doctors around me, like someone that could help, like, and it was very difficult to do that, just because a lot of that in the medical field is still fairly new. Like there aren't a lot of doctors or anything like that that know really or have studied a lot of that. So it was definitely very hard to finally find a doctor that was able to help me out. And, you know, I was told to see like therapists first, and it just felt like thing after thing after thing after thing that was making it hard for me to get on hormones. And I went through so many times where I was just very discouraged, and I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm making no progress. Like, and up until I found out about this clinic in the Chicago area that is very like LGBT.
It's a clinic that specializes in LGBTQ health.
Yeah, so I went there, and
What's it called?
Howard Brown Medical Center, I believe. I think they have like 2 locations, honestly, in the Chicago area. But then it was, after that, it was just like a piece of cake with doing that, because actually seeing someone that's what they do, it just made it super easy. So that was about a year and 6 months ago when I got my first shot of hormones. And yeah, it's been now a year and 6 months, and I feel great. I am looking, my next steps are definitely some surgeries, and yeah, but overall, like, hormones have just done me wonders. Like, mentally wise, I feel so much better.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like how does your body feel now? Like as much or as little as you want to talk about that, but your experiences with your body and yourself now, and like, you know, clothes, or do you feel, is
Yeah.
there still some struggle? Do you feel good? Do you feel comfortable? Have you
Well,
had cool
yeah,
experiences?
of course, there's still struggle, and I think there will always be struggle, no matter how many surgeries or what happens. I think that's something that, as transgender individuals, will always carry until the day we die. I think is that in some sort we're still not going to feel complete. I think, but I, before I started hormones, I feel like even though I was expressing myself how I wanted, um, like physically, it still wasn't enough, because at the end of the day, I would go home and I would take my makeup off, or, you know, it would still kind of come down to, you're still a guy. Like, I still felt the same. I still felt like it was just a mask that I was putting on. And it was, I went into like very, very like hard times. I was very depressed, and I think that was one of the biggest changes with getting on hormones. Aside from like physical things that happen with your body, which are great and obviously help, it was a lot like mental stuff that once I started, like, over time that I was on hormones, I became more confident in myself. I felt more like a woman. Like, it wasn't about like, oh, I'm putting makeup on and doing my hair and like that. It's like, I, even outside of that, I started feeling more like myself. And yeah, that was
Mhm,
the experience with hormones. Do you want
mhm.
to talk?
Okay, yes, before we turn it over to Fox, oh, thank you for sharing so much.
Yeah.
It's we just don't even really think about like what a mountain to climb to when you start making that decision,
Yeah.
like what a journey, and you know that you're setting yourself up for it for the rest of your life.
It's incredibly hard, and it's scary because, again, it's still something super new, and it's not like you can really look into like someone 30, 40 years from now and see how they're doing. I mean, I'm
Right.
sure there are individuals that have been along the process further, but it's very hard to kind of, it's just a risk in a way. Because when you do go to the doctor and stuff, and they prescribe to you and they're able to do that, a lot of the times it's still at your own risk. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not like they're guaranteeing stuff. It's like, hey, okay, yeah, you can start this and this. Obviously they do like a whole physical check, do your blood work, like that's all great, and they're monitoring you, which you should be doing. You should never like try to self-medicate or try to get like hormones on your own and try to do it yourself, because that's, you can quickly ruin your body. You know what I mean? But yes, it's still like very scary, because it's a risk that when you're messing with hormones and stuff like that, you just don't know. Like, everybody is different, genetics are different, and that's how it affects you. Like, just because like let's say he was a trans woman as well, we might have similar effects by it, but not everything's going to be the same, because it's going to affect us differently because it goes off base your genetics. So it's scary, but I feel like when you are living a life that you are not happy, you will do whatever it takes in order to feel happy. And that is what I have done. That's what he has done. And yeah, that's why when people ask me about being transgender, or like on my Instagram, I constantly get a lot of messages of people like opening up and saying, I have followed you for a while, and you know, I've been living my life as this, but I really think I'm a woman, and you are such an inspiration. And I'm always so willing to like talk and share my experiences because I know how hard it is. And at the beginning of my transition, that's what I looked for the most, was people online, on YouTube, on Instagram, that were doing it, because that's what makes you drive to accomplish those things as well, you know? So that's
Yeah.
why I love to do this. I feel the same with him, that he loves to do this as well and be so open and share my life on social media, because at the end of the day, I think some people are paying attention because they're dealing with the same thing. So I'm more happy to do it.
Yeah. That, but Fox, we'll go to you, but I just, you had brought that up too. When we've talked in the past, you'd mentioned that Instagram was a big support for you. And sitting here and thinking like, okay, like always, like thinking like, okay, what am I learning that can support, you know, these are my friends, these are my family, like they're struggling with these things that I don't know anything about. And it's amazing how much of a difference, like, and listening to your story, Audrey, like it was like exposure. Like in high school, you know, you're identifying as a gay man, but then all of a sudden when you start to find other people and you start to learn about all your options for pursuing your identity, and then you get exposed to a community that's saying like, yes, it's okay, like please pursue your identity, like please be your true self and whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so I think it's good from my perspective to sit here and notice like, and then that's also what led you to find like find a doctor that you actually felt comfortable with too, is like this trail. And so thinking about that from like an advocate or ally perspective, like helping our friends like find each other and like using places like social media to build that community and to connect people to resources like that they need to feel like their true self. That's a huge thing that we can do for people to just help find this community.
Yeah.
So yeah, Fox, I'm excited to hear about a little bit more about your journey too.
Yeah, so same kind of similar story with like identity growing up. I didn't actually really know myself. I knew I was different than the other kids. Definitely sexuality wise. I also identified as a lesbian after high school. I came out. But for me, why I'm like super into being visible with my transition is that there wasn't a lot of visibility when I was growing up, and for the media especially. And you would see in the media things about trans women, but not as much about trans men. And I didn't even know until I was in like college that it was like a physical possibility for women to transition to men. And that was just based off of my own research and curiosities. Um, but that was the turning point for me when it came to my identity. But I wasn't in a point in my life that I really felt safe coming out about it. So I just really pushed this feminine presence when I did come out as a lesbian. And I figured if I was going to be a woman, I'm going to rock being a woman. So I actually ended up being pretty hyper feminine at one point before my transition. Had hip long hair, was wearing all kinds of makeup and very feminine clothing, presented very feminine, was working in an industry as a promotional model with video games in a very not woman based industry. So it was very intense last few years of my pre-transition self. um, it wasn't until I lost my brother to suicide in 2014 that I really started to reflect on my identity. And I lost my brother to his lack of happiness, and it made me reflect on what actually makes me happy. So I started going back into the identity reflections and really started to figure out more of like who I was in my identity. And when I was living on a campground in isolation completely by myself, there like it was a 15-minute drive to even see people for that location. I had a lot of time to just reflect on myself, and I didn't have anyone that I had to be a certain way around, and my appearance and my thoughts were my own. I wasn't trying to impress people anymore or try to fit in because I was bullied a lot of my life. So no longer was I even having to do that, and I was really just able to be myself. And it it was then that I like came to figure out my identity was trans man. So when I returned to Chicago, I had wonderful roommates that helped me get my transition started. I didn't have any money at the time, didn't have insurance or anything. My roommate gave me their card for the bus to get to the clinic. Instagram was how I learned my doctors. You don't exactly go to your primary doctor and say, "Hey, I'm actually a man. How do I get into that process now?" So I started reaching out to people on Instagram, and one of the individuals I reached out to was a trans man living in Chicago, and he had started a year before me on his hormones. So I was like, how did you even get started on that? Who do you talk to? Like, how do I start on that? And the thing with the process of transitioning is it varies by state. And luckily, I was in Illinois, where you just have to sign a consent form that you're old enough and you're consenting to this treatment. But some states will require at least a year on or seeing a therapist to like confirm your identity. So luckily, I was living in Illinois where that wasn't mandatory. And I was able to start hormones in just 2 visits to my clinic who specialized in it. And like I said, I didn't have insurance. And I also go to Howard Brown in Chicago. And this clinic's amazing with helping people who are underinsured or don't have insurance. They have these thrift stores that are called Brown Elephant. And all the proceeds from what they sell there actually goes to funding people's treatments like me. So what is typically a $250 vial of testosterone is now only $30 for me, thankfully, because I would not have even been able to afford my visits, let alone my treatments. And so super grateful for that. But yeah, and now I'm 5 years into my transition, and I'm feeling much more at home in my body. It was very hard at first, and especially because you get into the habit of kind of comparing your transitions to others. Like she was explaining with genetic wise, I had a really hard time because I wasn't passing. And it wasn't more so that, it was that I was being misgendered for almost 2.5 years until it was like finally strictly sir and mister and he, him. So that was the hardest part, was like identifying a way, and there's no way you can like visibly get that validation from people unless you pass. And that's like one of my least favorite things, is this passing
Yeah.
this like goal that a lot of trans individuals tend to have, and I'm definitely one of them. And like I said, my beard is like one of the things I hold on to for my masculinity as a trans man. And I definitely used to compare myself to the individuals that would be transitioning in only a month and would already have a beard. It took me 2.5 years to get mine. So but I think it was another learning process for me going through the transition too, is to like, it's a lot of self-love that you're having to reflect on as well. So not only is it super vulnerable to come out with your identity and start that process, but it was like super important for me to learn how to love myself during that process.
Mm-hmm.
That was really hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Love you.
Love you too.
Yeah. Oof. Good stuff. Something that was coming up for me is just this, when you were talking, was just thinking about this, like you miss out on some of these experiences because you don't have the resources necessary to be yourself. And that's a problem, like in our community. That's a problem, like, because we need people to be their best selves, because it makes our world more beautiful and functional. And, you know, you're able to bring these gifts and skills that you have more fully. And part of those experiences that people deserve to have is their practice. It's both of you talked about this when you were kids and growing up and feeling like you didn't identify with the right people in the movies, or not feeling like you got to have some of those experiences. And that's like to me, that's like, okay, now I'm seeing this like big sign that we should not be robbed of experiences because of our gender expression. Like, every person, no matter how they're presenting, no matter if they're a passing male or a biological male or whatever, deserves to feel beautiful and sexy. And every person who is a biological woman or identifies as a woman or whatever deserves to feel strong and sexy. Like, we all deserve to have these experiences in interacting as our best self, no matter what that is.
Yeah, authenticity is.
Thanks for showing up as your best selves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for trans individuals to get rid of this passing norm.
Which it's hard. I feel like it's a very hard topic, just because
it's hard, but we need to be the examples in society. Otherwise, it's just going to keep revolving back to that same norm if we're not changing it. And I've been playing around with that vulnerability as well. I let her shave my beard off because I let her put me in drag. So yeah, she made me a drag.
It's gonna be coming out of my YouTube channel. I actually turned him into a hot woman.
So I was really like practicing that vulnerability and like trying to be like, okay, I spent all this time trying to pass, and what does it really matter? And to me, like, I want that to mean less to me, like this passing norm. So I'm exercising that a little more.
I want that for you too. And I want you to feel like you don't have to pass to do whatever you want to, whenever you want to. I want you to feel safe.
Yeah, I'm still valid, and anyone that doesn't feel they're passing, you're still valid in your identity. And that's, I don't think that should be the main goal. I think like the self-love and like being authentic is what needs to be the priority.
Okay, I knew that was going to go by so fast. We don't have very much time left. Yeah. So I have a fun question.
Okay.
I want to know your jam. I want to know a song that comes on and everyone's like, oh, this is Fox's song. Maybe it's the song that when Audrey puts you in drag and you're doing your strut walk and you're like, this is me. This is me. This is me. What is it?
Oh, my feel-good song is So Good by Forrest. That's one that like just puts me in like a really good mood, and like it might not be like a jam where I would like go drag out to, but that's my like my song to get me like hyped and happy.
Okay, I love it. Audrey?
I don't know, I have a lot. Probably Don'cha by the Pussycat Dolls. It's an older song, but
I love that song.
Every time that comes on, I'm just like, it's a done deal. Like, give me the spotlight.
That, when I was like 12, when everybody would go to sleep, I would turn on just that song on my CD player, and I would do dance, like I would choreograph dances to it in the dark, and then people would come in my room and be like, Veronika, go to bed. And I'd be like, I'm sleeping.
I would do that too, and I would always wonder, I'd be like, why am I watching these chicks dance on a chair, and why do I want to do that?
What is coming over me? Why do I want to do that? Okay, I want to do a little thing for you. So that was your jam, and now this is your jelly. I'm starting this little Breathe thing called This Is Your Jelly. So at Breathe, we like to say like the jelly is like the good stuff. It's the meat. It's like why we care about each other. It's the jelly. We also hang this really beautiful jellyfish above the pond at Breathe. So I want you to take your little hand, and I want you to put your little jelly in it. It's your little jellyfish. And your little jelly is full of all the good stuff in the world. It's full of self-love. It's full of acceptance. It's full of community. It's full of playtime, of silliness, of all the things, of belonging. And it's with you forever. And now I want you to put it wherever you want. You can put it in your heart. You can put it in your pocket. You can put it in your armpit. Put it wherever you want. And now you have it forever, no matter where you are. And if you're watching this now or later, you can do that with us. Take your little jelly. And wherever you are, you have that little jelly, and you know that you are part of a community and that you are super, super loved. And yeah. You got your little jelly.
I love it.
Okay, do some quick shout outs of people that you are good follows to learn about. If you're interested in learning more about LGBTQ experience, where can people go?
The individual that I reached out to for my help with my transition, that has continually been a huge help with all of my trans questions, is Gorilla Shrimp on Instagram. It's at Gorilla Shrimp. His name is Malcolm, and he's amazing, and he's full of information, and he just is a ball of joy. So.
Also, Suddenly Samantha, I feel like her Instagram page is full of just knowledge with different aspects about being transgender and stuff. All of her posts usually consist of lots of information of like what she's going through at the time. Like she just recently went through what is that? Like she had gender confirmation surgery a while ago, I believe, and she had to have some like revisions recently. So she kind of she's very open about all of that. So she's really cool to follow.
She also has her own podcast TV. It's Trans in Real Life. So that's also on her Instagram page.
Yeah. Get Happy on Instagram. Alex was one of the very first trans girls around this area that I started talking to, and she helped me a lot with my transition. She's also very open about her transition and educating people. So yeah, her Instagram is at Get Happy.
Cool. So for anybody watching, we will share, we'll provide a link on our social media for the things that we mentioned today, to our music and to these great people to follow. And then also somebody I really love on YouTube is called ContraPoints, CONTRA Points, ContraPoints, a trans woman who does really, really like deep dives into the concepts behind the trans experience, like non-binary or like how we present. And I find them to be like really informative and educational. So for everybody, that's really good info. And then there's a great video on YouTube called Stonewall Forever, which is a 20-minute documentary and a really good look into not only the LGBTQ community, but just like the community. It's like this great documentary about what it means to be part of like a beautiful like rainbow family, like a really diverse group of people. And that documentary hits you in the right place for sure. Thank you for joining us tonight. This was the first kickoff of a Pulse series from the Breathe community, hosted by the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, featuring my lovely guests, Fox and Adriana. It was lovely to have you. If you're just joining us, this video will be available for 24 hours on our Instagram following when we're done, and then we'll also post it on our YouTube channel with all of our other Breathe Pulses that you can see whenever at your convenience. We have some cool stuff going on, so definitely make sure to stay connected with us on social media. We have a giving tree available. We're kind of giving back during this Corona experience to the community internally. Some really good resources there. You can get involved with Breathe. You can host a pulse or join a committee. There's lots of ways you can be involved. Keep checking in with this conversation. We have another one happening in a few weeks. And we have a public event happening on the 26th, which is like a live version of Breathe Online. Some of the workshops that we normally do at the festival will be available online to the public. Thank you, everybody, so much for being with us. Thank you, Fox. Thank you, Adri.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Let's dance our way out. 4 seconds. Dance. 4 seconds.